Welcome, everybody, to our next open discussion. I am joined today by my friend Mike Grandinetti, and this week's focus is going to be on innovation challenges. We will look at two panels that we had this week. First of all, Michael Schrage, who had the panel yesterday about the innovation conundrum. Should IT or digital own the innovation agenda? Preceding him was Naomi Eide, who had a panel about innovations that will transform the user experience. Now, I will say that Mike and I both prepared for this conversation, reading your questions, looking at the films, and we're ready for a really good conversation. I will remind everybody to look at our community guidelines if you've not already read them. In a nutshell, let's keep the conversation supportive, generous, and constructive. All participants are on mute. You can use the raise hand at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Go to reactions and you'll see raise hand. If you don't see it there, then you have an older version of Zoom and you can find it under panelists. When you raise the hand, we'll call on you one by one and unmute you, and you'll have an opportunity to make your comment or speak. I do also ask that you turn on your video when speaking. It makes for a better recording. We've organized this into two topic areas. The first one is the digital innovation agenda. Second one is user experience. We'll take about 25 minutes for each, but that's very loose. It just depends on how the conversation is flowing. So without further ado, Mike, do you have some opening words?
Yeah, and Allan, it's always a pleasure to have a chance to work with you in the MIT CIO Symposium. I'm looking forward to a very robust discussion today. Innovation is a big, broad term, and it can often be overused and misunderstood. I think, the prism that we're going to look at it through today is really the ownership of the innovation agenda, which many people call the digital agenda. And I think it's important to distinguish between digital transformation and innovation, because innovation is much broader than that. But I think the point of intersection from both of those panels, and what I love to hear is the technology executives in the C-suite are probably more customer or client focused than they've ever been. And so I think as we pursue this discussion, regardless of what technology may be out there, the real message is if it doesn't support a positive customer experience and lead to higher NPS, it's probably not something that we should focus on. So I think that's a great overarching umbrella for the discussion today.
Excellent. All right. Well, listen, don't be shy. Please put your hand up and we will get you into the conversation. Anybody want to jump in? Please go ahead. Otherwise, I really liked yesterday's conversation. I loved the way Michael kept that going. I thought that the panelists were very, very good.
Yeah.
And I have a first hand. All right, Irving, you're up.
So, one takeaway that I got from yesterday, we had a discussion of legacy versus digital. And one thing that I noticed is that increasingly when we say legacy, we mean those parts of the IT infrastructure that are in the back end, that are highly operational, that are slow changing, and that, if something goes wrong with them, bad things happen. Whether it is you lose data, you cannot connect anymore, etc. So you're really careful. On the other side, we seem to be using digital, and I think Mike said this at the beginning, much more focused on the front end, the people-facing, market-facing sides of the business. And because it's people versus engineering, you need to experiment, you need to try different things, agile, etc. But I think we're using, even though legacy and digital, if you look by the book, don't quite mean this, that's how they are being used more and more. And I wanted to hear from Mike and you whether you agree that that seems to be the way we are using it now.
Yeah, and I see David Cotton's got his hand up. But David, if we can hold off on your question, let me just address Irving's point. Irving, I couldn't agree more. Right. First of all, there's this unfortunate first-class citizen, second-class citizen connotation when we talk about digital versus legacy or digital versus traditional, right? And it all almost inevitably imposes this, I'm working on the really cool stuff, and you're unfortunately not worthy of that, and therefore you get to work in the back end, when in fact we all know, right? And to your company, IBM, right? The three horizons of growth, right? You need operational excellence in Horizon 1, right? You need that level of robustness to keep the business running day to day. So I do find it a little bit too simplistic to just focus on, these two concepts, because underneath traditional or legacy and underneath digital are so many subsets that need to be thought about. That being said, I thought the panel that Shrage directed yesterday was brilliant because it got to the very essence of what we're talking about, right? And I don't think I've seen a panel that has really delved into the depth of this discussion in that way. But I agree with you, Irving. Absolutely.
Yeah, I like the way that Akira Bell put it, that, it's really a holistic approach between traditional and digital, and to avoid othering the traditional. I'm going to move on and get David into the conversation. David, you're up.
Thank you, Allan. As I've been thinking about the panels of the past couple of days, it's very clear that we're talking about is essentially a textbook change process. We're talking about an organizational change. And as I tell all new Sloan arrivals, the most useful course I took in my time at Sloan was Theories of Planned Change, all about how you do change and how you resist change and all of that. It comes up everywhere. Everything you do, change process is critical. And I'd like to highlight the difference between incremental change, which we understand it can be planned out. There's a lot of books on how to do incremental change. You might say the agile methodology is all about planned change. And then there's disruptive change, which is a completely different animal. The recent pandemic enforced a disruptive change. We could not manage that the way we would have liked to have done. But there are other disruptive changes. One of the things that I experienced earlier in my career was the demise of the mini computer business in Massachusetts. I was at Data General for a while, and then Wang Laboratories, which some of you may know of or remember. I tried to help Wang Laboratories migrate to PCs. I wanted them to turn into what Dell turned into. They obviously didn't. They could not imagine you could sell $5 billion of boxes that cost $3,000. It was just one of those things. I wrote an article that's published on my LinkedIn about Tesla and their introduction of EVs, a clearly disruptive change in the automotive market. And most people don't understand or see. And the hard part, I guess, as organizations is, how do you recognize an essential disruptive change that you're facing? Because another lesson I got early on was that when you're afraid to do something new because it competes with your legacy business, it is a mistake to be afraid, because your competitors have no such fear of disrupting your legacy business. If anyone is going to compete with your legacy business, it should be you. So how do you find these things? How do we set up organizations? How do we set up roles? How do we, as managers, find the disruptions that are on the horizon, embrace them, and succeed with them?
Yep. And listen, this is my greatest passion. So I appreciate the question. I've been teaching a course called Disruptive Innovation, Disruptive Business Models for 20 years. And, we talked just a moment ago about the 3 horizons of growth, right? And I don't know if you know that framework, but that framework comes from a couple of McKinsey partners. And it was put into place while Irving was running a very big part of IBM's business after Lou Gerstner came in, right? And there's a recognition that in Horizon 1, which is the here and the now, right? That's paying the lights, paying the salaries, keeping the machine humming. But you need a focused set of resources in Horizon 2, which is sort of the near term, in Horizon 3, which is the far term, where their whole mission is to reinvent the business. And their incentives and everything about those groups is about not being afraid to disrupt the status quo. Because what IBM learned the hard way, and many other companies have, Blockbuster never even saw it coming. They just, one day they were there, the next day they were gone, is that first of all, it's different DNA, right? I could never work in a Horizon 1 business, okay? I just couldn't do it. It's not in me. I need to be in a Horizon 2, Horizon 3 business. So, we have figured out how to do this for a long time. The problem is most CEOs and most C-suites are all about, what got me here will get me to the future, right? I've had success. Now I'll just repeat that success, rinse and repeat. No, doesn't work that way. So it all comes down to culture and mindset and leadership, period. That's my answer. Irving?
So actually, we're going to go to Allie now, Mike, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
Go ahead, Allie. You have to unmute.
Sorry, that was my fault. One of the things I find out is the CIOs, they are not part of the board, because one thing I noticed that all the times they were talking about, we have to get the directions from the board and CEO. I thought part of the disruption was the CIO become part of the company, not taking the orders. They should be knowing the business, and they should bring new technology, not technology as a sex of the spectacular technology. They should become a board, not a plumber. I started working in 1978 in IT, and they were calling the IT as a plumber. But I felt yesterday we are in the same boat, and disruption should change that to be part of the board and be creative for the business, not just being told we got to do this for the end users.
Yeah. So Ali, you're a perfect setup man for me. Thank you.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, because next week, Ali, this is the entire topic of the panel that I will moderate. And it's a panel based on research done by Peter Weil at MIT CISR around the need for a critical mass of digitally savvy board members. And if you have a critical mass of digitally savvy board members, you now have created a mindset and a culture to allow the C-suite to align with you and drive the digital agenda. So, there's exactly to David's point from before. It's all about change management. And there may be a lot of people within the C-suite that believe digital is important, but if there's some obstacles, it will not happen. And so, I would not say, I certainly didn't take away yesterday that anybody was a plumber. I thought all 3 of those panelists were extraordinarily competent, articulate people who were in fact aligned with their CEOs, who understood what their mission was, right? So I actually interpreted it very differently than you. But the core point is there are CEOs that don't get it, and they are obstacles. And that's what we're going to address next week.
Well, let's get Irving into the conversation. Irving.
So I just want to add to what Michael said about Horizon 3, the metaphor I use with Horizon 3 is that it's like an asteroid heading for your business. Now, if you're not watching the sky, if you're not scanning the sky looking for asteroids, you'll wake up one day and you'll say, what happened? However, as we all know, asteroids don't just show up one day. You can scan the sky, you can see the disruptions coming. The problem, and I faced this in IBM, when IBM almost went out of business, late 80s, early 90s, and companies face this all the time, is that the people who've built the business to where it is now don't want to accept that the asteroid is coming. So it's there, they are being told it's coming, but they say, no, we are fine. We can survive the asteroid. And the reality is you cannot.
Hubris and complacency are the death of most businesses. Absolutely.
All right, we got Kevin next. Kevin, you're up.
Kevin, you're on mute.
That's okay. Sorry about that. It wasn't letting me unmute myself. Good morning, everybody. I think all these comments align to what we've heard actually over the last couple of weeks. And it always seems to me that the common theme in all these things is you either have leadership that gets it or you don't. And in my personal experience, putting your toe in the water of change, small, incremental, hey, they'll all come along when they see it. That's just not the way it works. People have too much to protect on a personal basis, whether it be ego. Mike, I liked what you said. I think executive hubris is what actually kills most companies. And there's plenty of examples of that. And, it's a little bit dated now, but look what Apple did to Sony, right? Sony had the Walkman, had the library, had the artist, had everything they needed to do. Steve Jobs and Apple comes along with the iPod and creates an industry that Sony's not necessarily a lack of innovative company,
right?
But they didn't get there.
Yeah.
Look
at what Apple did to BlackBerry.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, just overnight, done. Yeah.
So some of it is that vision, but it's been in my experience, and I've been through multiple transformations, some at the all the way at the business level and many at the IT level. And every single one has a similar pattern. And that is, you all need to change. 20 to 30% of the people will be early adopters and get it and will help lead the change. 40 to 50%, maybe if you're lucky, will get it. And then the tail end of that, they got to go find something else. And I think come back to my opening point on leadership is if you can't get people along to embrace the new strategy, you don't change the strategy, you need to change the people. And that actually ties into the board comments. I was actually thinking about what I said. There is absolutely no reason every single board of every single public company should have at least one prior CIO on the board. And I don't think it's 10% of the boards have CIOs on them. And I think when you took that combination of the short-term push for the quarterly results and, the earnings per share, the combination of loyalty and, in one prior life at Staples, tenure was overly weighted. And look what happened to Staples. That combination of that top 5 to 10 executives, the combination of the board being underrepresented in what digital actually means, and the fear of making a change on legacy teams to accelerate the change, that seems to be a very common thread in my experience. I'd like to see what everybody else has seen.
Yeah. Kevin, I couldn't agree more. Again, it comes down to, right? I mean, we're now celebrating the 25th anniversary of the digital era, right? Think about Netscape and the Mosaic browser, right? And then think about the inflection point in 2007 with the iPhone being dropped into the world. If executives don't understand today, after 25 years of watching hundreds of businesses, including many Fortune 500 businesses, becoming insolvent, if they don't understand that after the 2008 financial crisis or after the most recent crisis, what else will it take for them to finally realize that maybe the world has changed a tiny bit? And so it's a remarkable thing to me that boards are putting CEOs in place or hiring cronies that are allowed, given their fiduciary responsibility, to ignore reality. They're living in a parallel universe, right? I don't know how else to describe it.
So, Mike, is there any action you can take if you're faced with a board that doesn't get it? What's
Well, yeah, I mean, listen, we're going to talk about this at length next week. But like anything else, and this is change management, and there's different power centers within a large Fortune 500 company. You've got the chairman of the board, you've got key committees, you've got the board itself, you've got the CEO, you've got the C-suite. And it requires a certain amount of, courage and leadership to align all of those different sort of subgroups, as Kevin said, each with their own agendas, their own fiefdoms to protect, their own reputations to further. But if you can't manage change through a Fortune 500 company with all of the complexity and all of the political chaos that is inherent in it, the company's just going to go off the guardrails. But it requires more committed people,
Well, look at this, Mike. Our friend Zoya's jumping in.
It's always a good, when Irving and Zoya both show up, it's going to be a good day. And this is going to be a great day. Hey, Zoya.
Always.
Hey, everyone. Good to see all the familiar faces. I want to pivot a little bit, Mike, with your permission. Yes, leadership. Yes, embracing change. Yes, embracing disruption. All good. Okay. I want to talk about product strategy, because it's not about embracing digital. It's not only being hyper aware of IT. Okay, there is a reason why in IT legacy organizations, there is a move now to switch from project management to product strategy, product management. And that is also true at the highest levels of leadership, whether you're CIO or CEO. And where I'm going with this, I want to give us a case study, which is what happened with Verizon Media. On my watch, by the way, I was an enterprise, but this was consumer business, but it was a highest level product strategy, and it became a flop later. So they bought Yahoo, they bought AOL, they created the company called Oath. Internally, it was a lot of leadership, organizational changes across the board, across all verticals, even though initially it was thought of maybe it will be only one vertical attempted, but it was a great product strategy, all innovative, all leaders, all disruption, all change. And look what happened, okay? The company pivoted to another product strategy, which is 5G all the way globally, right? So I just offer this case as an example where all the stars were aligned for video streaming, for reusing consumer data, and yet it had to be dropped.
So I have followed this case, right? I was always very skeptical, Zoya, from the very beginning. I mean, of course, Yahoo had 8 CEOs that came in after Jeff Yang, including the great Marissa Mayer, and no one could turn around the Yahoo culture and turn around the big ship known as Yahoo, right? And AOL, of course, was an incredibly, just, I don't know, it was a primitive company by web standards. So I guess let me ask you, I know Tim Armstrong was brought in to run the business, and Armstrong was, at one point, highly respected. But was it the right product strategy? I mean, was it just looking in the rearview mirror and wishing and hoping that they could compete with Google and with all of the new digital platforms. I never thought they had a chance, right? I actually thought Marissa Meyer's a $1 billion acquisition of Tumblr was an insane mistake, because no 15-year-old kid in their right mind wants to be a part of the Yahoo brand, right? The minute that Yahoo owns Tumblr, all of their core audience is heading for the exit. So I'm with you, but was it the right product strategy for that team, given the competitive landscape? And given
you don't expect me to pass judgment on my former bosses, do you?
Well, yes, I do. Yes, I do. I'm gonna play Michael. Let me play Michael. I'm gonna play Michael Schrade for a second. No, yes.
From the IT trenches where I was sitting, we had all the capabilities. My point to this discussion is it is the product strategy pivoting question, because you could do anything in technology. Right. We had the streaming capability, the ability to do AI on a much larger set of data. So anything is possible in technology. Verizon has always been proud of having custom applications across the board. It has been a technology company and a digital company forever, because all Verizon operations have always been based on software, right? So I want to just highlight the top level decision making in strategizing and productizing, how challenging it can be.
It can be. And let me just share one very simple, very quick example. Right? So I've done a lot of work in Europe. And, a lot of these are 150-year-old companies, and they see, the digital transformation, and they want to compete with, a Nest, for example. So a lot of older energy companies want to compete with Nest, right? And these companies have been working off of 10-year product life cycles. And they think they're going to be able to just wish their way into competing with a company like Nest that has 3-month product life cycles, right? And part of the role is to be the bad guy and say, guys, you do not have the culture to do this. I know you want to do it, but it's going to take a generation of internal change for that to ever happen. And so if they were to chase that, it would be just destroying shareholder wealth, right? So all these pieces have to fit together. Absolutely.
Mike, you and Zoya seem to be implying, at least to me, that there's a cool factor, a aesthetic, if you will, to the product that it's hard to put your finger on, right? Just having the product strategy, just whatever. You made the comment that people run away once Yahoo got involved. I mean, any thoughts about that cool factor?
Yeah, it's very real. I mean, I stare into the eyes of Gen Z kids every day in my classrooms, and I mean, they're. We all know we were there once, right? A long time ago, but we were all there, and it's a very important part of that part of your life is if it's not cool, we're not in, right? I mean, Facebook lost the cool factor when Grandma and Grandpa started co-opting Facebook, and it continues to evolve, right? Then Snapchat has the cool factor, and TikTok. Now TikTok is the way cool thing, right? And my student is the first time in my life, because of the all of the controversy, I've never downloaded the TikTok app. So a lot of my students send me stuff on TikTok. I can't watch it, right? It's the first time I've just been unwilling to download an app. Usually I'm trying to keep up with my students, but TikTok was a bridge too far for me. I like to keep my data in this country if I can. Yeah.
All right. We got Kevin up.
Yeah.
Kevin, you're on.
Mike, your comments remind me a little bit of the Cisco story with Tom Chambers, that he took 10 years, and Cisco's probably a little bit on steroids, but a lot of companies have the history of a lot of acquisitions that never truly get integrated. And I happened to serve on their customer advisory board for 4 or 5 years, and they were very proud of, and the number hits me as 32, 33, something like that, general manager types. And 50% or more of their compensation was about how they helped other people on those billion-dollar businesses. As I recall, if it wasn't a $10 billion business, it didn't get a whole lot of attention in those days. And think about a little bit of and just to bring in Zoya's point about product. You guys remember the flip phone?
One of my favorite case studies of disruption. And part of it is how quickly a product business can be disrupted, But more importantly, as John Chambers saw in a heartbeat when the iPhone came out with video, that it was a failure. And even though he just paid $2 billion, he wrote it off overnight, right? That's a leader. He understood it was game over and he wrote it off. He didn't pretend there was an opportunity.
It's actually a great product. I still have one. I don't use it, but I still have it.
Oh, they're awesome. Yeah, brilliant.
My point, though, is that product strategy, to Zoya's point, or a fragment of a point, vector of a point, was what Chambers, I think, was thinking. And actually, I know what he was thinking because he was also doing the smart cities in Korea or wherever it was creating environments that would automatically create more bandwidth demand, which was their core business. And of course, someone faster, nimbler, quicker got there. He saw it and reacted. But think about the two dichotomies of this last few minutes of conversation. One is speed of execution. And part of speed of execution is knowing when to quit. But one is having a product strategy. And then one is having a brand awareness that you're not coming out of the quicksand because you're not willing to use TikTok. Albeit, this 5x5 panel looks like a lot of TikTok videos going on. But the dynamics that puts in being able to have leadership, coming back to my previous comments, or all the comments, not just mine, puts an interesting set of dynamics of putting it in perspective and how fast to act and to execute. And so between brand, building the culture, which is usually a longer journey, and bringing a product mindset that has a very tight cycle on it into whatever the mothership happens to be, that's a pretty tightrope. And then that would add to say, hey, does it make more sense to do to the 3-box theory or the 3 time horizon theory? That how do you really do that third box? And I wonder what the panel on that is, because how many third box winners have we actually seen in history?
Evan, what a brilliant example, right? I've taught the Cisco case, one of my very favorite cases, for years. It brings in Zoya's point perfectly, because if you think about John Chambers, one of the great CEOs in history, right? Definitely nowhere near as maybe well regarded, because he wasn't as well known, because they were mostly back office or what Ali called plumbing, right? But during their early run, right, they had done 130 acquisitions. And they were one of the very few companies that not only understood the importance of innovation, when they brought in a startup, they gave them an incredible amount of resources, right? And they made sure everybody worked together. And their track record on acquisitions was unprecedented. The vast majority failed. They were like the Ted Williams of acquisitions, right? They were unbelievable. But what happened to them, to Zoya's point, is when they ran out of headroom in the B2B space and they started chasing the B2C opportunity, like the set-top boxes or the in-home routers, right? That market was evolving way more quickly than the market for switches and routers and stuff in the enterprise. And that's when they bought Flip, right? And I think it was an example that when you do go outside of your core, even one of the great leadership teams in the world struggles. So, were they just getting too ambitious for their own good by taking on this consumer market? And to your point about them wanting more consumption of bandwidth, look at Intel. Intel has been delving in businesses for 30 years to increase the consumption of chips. Not a single one of them has been successful. Not a single one, right? They've been in every business on the planet, and they've all failed because they had the luxury of the monopoly of their chipset. But they just can't they can't paint themselves out of the semiconductor corner. So, the team matters greatly, right? You've got to marry team and product strategy. Right?
Indeed. Good point. Well, let's bring David into the conversation. David, you're up.
David, you're muted.
Yeah. I just had to wait for the request to unmute to appear. I just wanted to continue this discussion about innovation and change and highlight two other challenges that I see businesses facing. One is, and this affected a lot of my clients as I was helping in IT capacity with a number of organizations. And the real question is, what business are you in? And a lot of people, I guess I'm going to say, don't really understand what their business is. I had a good later discussion with George Corbin, who was one of the panelists in the earlier presentation, about the issue of who do you compete with. And he pointed out, I thought it was an excellent point, that, you think of Marriott hotels as being in the room and bathroom rental, the bed rental for a night. But that isn't really what they were for a large chunk of their business. They were the thing that made business meetings possible from people that were distributed. All of a sudden, a tool like Zoom is competing with a hotel, which I'm not sure anyone was thinking about. And that is a huge, I guess I'll say, challenge and opportunity, because as we look at our businesses and try to guide them into the future, can we reimagine, recast what our business is to give us more opportunity? The second piece of this that I think is also a significant issue is we become complacent with our partners, with our channels, with, I'll say, the ways we have done business. And a good example of that is let's say, the role of the car dealer in the automotive market, which is heavily entrenched and is legally protected in some states and whatever. And I happen to be a person, I had a local Acura dealer, and I drove 3 Acuras in a row. I was very happy with my dealer. But in talking with people, most people do not consider their dealer a reason to deal with their brand. They are not of that. They aren't of that role in the sale process. Most people think of their dealer as someone you have to put up with to buy the car, and you have to negotiate, and they cheat you. And, there's a lot of people don't like that process, which is why I have some other companies like CarMax with no negotiation have been able to penetrate that business. When I bought my Tesla a couple of years ago, and I discovered that I could make an appointment on my phone and they would come to my house or office to service my car. All of a sudden, it's like, and why did I like my dealer? It is a complete change in process. And if you look at the economics, it turns out one of the reasons why auto dealers make sense in the internal combustion market, they don't make enough money on the sale of the car, they make money on the service. Without the service, the dealers don't make economic sense. The electric cars need less than a quarter as much service. You cannot afford the investment in a dealer network. So the approach that they took, it completely recast. So it's not just the change to an electric car. It's a complete change to the channel, to the customer relationship. And yes, they're having growing pains and will probably continue to do so. But it's just interesting to follow the market, because how many other industries could do a complete recast like that? Where are the opportunities? And, personally, I'm looking to find the opportunities so I can invest in them early and make some money, even if I'm not involved in the industry.
Yeah, I don't know if you want to, reaction to that. I mean, there's no question that, new technologies enable new business models, right? We've seen that. Airbnb is a perfect example of that. Uber took the second oldest business on the planet, the taxi business, and just decimated them in a very short period of time. But you also need, if you're Marriott, going back to a lot of our discussion, you need people on the board that can say, I see this technology coming. We need to run some scenarios about how it might destroy our business and how we may jump on this bandwagon before other people do. And this is that Horizon 2, Horizon 3 discussion that we keep coming back to, right? I mean, and a lot of people are just, looking at their current competition very myopically, and let's be honest, right? The lines have blurred. Amazon is in every business now. Amazon is coming into healthcare delivery. I mean, they went from books to healthcare delivery. So, I mean, this is all about being hyper aware, right? Because as Irving said, the asteroid's coming, right? Blockbuster saw Netflix born in 1997. And in 2007, 10 years later, they just continue to say, we got this. I mean, 10 years, shame on them, right?
All right. Well, let's find that tiger around the corner. We have Joseph up next. Oops. Joseph, you're up.
Hi, I've led several changes. I was the first at my company to propose and build demonstrator, modular clouds and edge data, along with a host of other disruptive strategies that proved customer value. Yet we delayed market entry in each, because each time my manager fought to put me back into his core team to focus on this year's critical revenue portfolio. It wasn't until more recently that I was recognized as a technical anticipation person who was able to drive change to the mid and high levels. So my question for you is, what are your thoughts on change culture that need to penetrate beyond the board and into the business managers and the overall culture in rewards?
Yeah, I'm going to ask Irving, who has deep experience doing this within very technical business units and R&D groups, and Zoya. I think they'll have the best perspective on this. Yeah.
Irving?
Yeah, so Joselius put out a similar point in the chat, which is that Joselius said, so are we suggesting that if you're doing something really new, you need to protect it, you need to put it in a separate part of the company? So let me talk about my experience with IBM in two areas, the internet and Linux. So the internet, when it first came out commercially in the early 90s, was everything IBM had not been. Open instead of proprietary, collaborative, external, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now, what does a company has been around for a long time do when something totally new comes in? They try to kill it. And I don't mean this as anything negative. I mean, if you're a pack of wolves and you see some new species showing up, you're going to kill it. So locally, IBM had a superb CEO, Lou Gerstner. So Lou Gerstner said, Irving, I want you to lead IBM's internet strategy across the company. And we're going to do this outside all of the business. We're going to have different measurements. Now, and this is very, very important. I did this for 5 years, but my job was to go out of business because my job was to integrate the internet into the whole company. And if I had tried to set up a totally different business, I would have failed, because the point was not to do something very different, but to leverage the internet to change the culture of the company and so on. I was good, but I couldn't have done it if I didn't have the protection of Lou Gerstner, because when people said, IBM is an idiot, I know I was going to say, Irving is an idiot, Irving is an, I know Allan doesn't want me to use those words, but
but you did anyway, just for the hell of it.
But I did anyway. My answer was, look, it's not Irving who is the idiot, what you're saying is Luke Gerstner is an idiot because what I'm doing is really executing Luke Gerstner's strategy. We did something similar with Linux a few years later, and once more, it was started as a separate thing with the incredible support of Sam Palmisano, who was then the CEO. And after a few years, we put it out of business, and because it no longer needed that. So, and that what that says is that if you don't have the right, I've written quite a bit about this. If you don't have the right leadership at the very top of the company, don't even try to embrace a disruptive technology, because the forces of the company will absolutely kill you. And I wonder, Zoya, if that happened to Verizon, which in the end was a telecommunications company. It was not a media company, and it bought two legacy companies to try to become media. But I wonder if they were just left in left field on their own and so on.
Yes.
Well, let's see what. Oh, Zoya's there.
Yes, I'm here. I'm unmuted, and I will catch the glove from Irving and try to answer. And then I want to talk about another example of the same thing. So yes, they were kept separate. Yes, digital media was formed into a separate organization. First oath with its own management and everything. Then there was an attempt to apply AI to the new mass of data. And then there was a new product built for digital streaming, and there were great product ideas. And I don't know what happened because I'm out for a while now. But yes, the market forces could have just done it. As Irving, your point is in the chat that it couldn't have happened, and Mike, to your point. But I want to give you another example. Yes, it is most common that a new disruptive idea gets explored in the form of a skunk works at the company. A team is built, new people get hired with no domain knowledge, and they're tasked with disrupting. And they're very proud, they're paid well, they're fed well, and they're doing something that nobody else even understands. Okay, and we all walk around that hallway and dying of envy. Now, what happens next? I was in a group like this for e-commerce. Early on at GT Laboratories, we were a bunch of PhDs creating brand new e-commerce consumer website for GTE at the time, later Verizon. We became very successful, but what we did not realize initially that when we put in online bill presentment on the site, you need an API to pull the data, or you can put a PDF, as our competitor AT&T did at the time. The website was a brochureware, and many other e-commerce sites were just marketing static content. At the time, 2000, personalization came in, broad vision, vignette, all the companies that we now call customer intimacy, and we call it whatever we call it. But the point is, it could be done with technology. All you needed was APIs into the depth of the company. And that is how we had to go out of our way into the depth of the backends and disrupt those legacies. So now I see exactly the same thing happening with AI. Data scientists are data science, new trend. Let's form again skunk work group, hire people and let them play with our data with no domain knowledge, say. And then what happens? What questions should we ask? Maybe we should get business analysts on board. Maybe we should get product strategy on board. And now our questions will have meaning and our analytical output will have meaning. So it's nothing wrong with that, but I would like to hear from the person who posted the question. Joselius, you work for GE Appliances, and GE had quite an interesting history with platform and product. that I would be curious on. Back to you, Mike.
And so, Joseph, I think these were two great examples, but let me ask you a couple of questions, right? Did you work in a startup or a mid-sized growth business, or what type of, business were you in where you kept getting pulled in to help make revenue? Oh, we got to unmute you.
Well, Joseph, raise your hand and then you'll come to the top and then we'll
raise your
unmute
hand.
you.
I see him on my screen, but
Here we go.
all right.
All right. Go ahead.
Big company, a giant company. So the entrenched culture is certainly there.
So, when I talk about these three horizons of business, right? And I talked earlier, you may have been on at the time, but I talked about how very different personalities fit into the core versus the future businesses, right? And you clearly are a future guy, right? You seem to have established yourself as someone who can see around corners and create next generation technology, right? And so the problem is that one, your leadership team doesn't understand where to best put you, or didn't,
Right.
Because there's a lot more people that are available that can, get out the next version. There are a lot less people like you. So an astute leader would say, okay, Joseph is someone I want looking at the future of our business, and I'm going to protect him and give him the freedom and the resources to do that, no matter what's happening with our revenue, right? And so in many ways, it comes down to a personal and professional decision for yourself. And this is something I tell my students all the time, right? Self-awareness, right? If you're going to interview with a company, understand where within that organization's three horizons they're going to put you. And if they're going to put you in a Horizon 1 business and you have no interest in incremental evolutionary advancement, you're going to be unhappy very quickly, right? And so when Zoya talked about, envy, right? A lot of us want to be in that forward-looking group, and it sounds like that's where you belong.
Yes.
And if it's a giant company, maybe there are other leaders that are going to be a little bit less short-term oriented and recognize your value and give you the space to do what you love to do and can contribute.
Very good. And that's what I love to do, Mike. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So let me make a point that Zoya mentioned. When Lou Gerstner asked me to lead the internet division, I had been in IBM 25 years. I came up through the research labs, and prior to that, one of the major things I had done is to be involved in the transformation of IBM's mainframes. It doesn't get more legacy than mainframes. So I was an absolute insider of the business. What that means is that when I had to go out and transform my colleagues, they knew who I was. I knew who they were. If I had been a startup that was just brought into the company, I wouldn't even know where first base was. I would have hit the ball and start running toward third base because I wouldn't have known the rules of the game. So I think Zoya made that point. Be really careful who you ask to help you transform, which I think is part of what Lou Gerstner and Sam Palmisano did well, which is they picked somebody who understood the company, but also because of the research background, understood how to look for asteroids.
You're not threatening in any way. You were known, respected, trusted, and therefore, when you spoke, people thought you had the right agenda. You weren't there just to change for the sake of change. Absolutely. Yeah.
Right.
Love it. Allan, I know we're coming up on time, so I'm going to do a process check with you.
So we are coming up on time, but we still have room for a couple more questions. I actually have a question for Irving. And that is, you talked about if you're going to drive innovation and change, you need to have support from the top. But also, in the spirit of Tom Malone's book, Superminds, where he characterizes groups of people that are more effective than others, and what are those ingredients? You think there's some secret sauce to a team that's really going to be able to make an impact with innovation?
Oh, absolutely. It's got to be collaborative. No, innovation is at the other end of looking for a research technology where you're looking through the microscope or whatever. Innovation, in the end, you need technology, you need marketing, you need development, you need salespeople. So it doesn't get any more collaborative than to try to do something really innovative and bring it to the marketplace. This is very different from invention. Invention, you can do more with a few people in the research labs. Innovation takes the whole company into account, and you need to be really, really collaborative in nature. No question.
And if I may add, right, so Irving is using the word collaborative. And I think, the important point is that the leader of that team is willing to be challenged. The leader of that team is building a very diverse team with a very diverse set of skills, diverse cognitive skills, diverse functional skills, diverse levels of experience. And the leader doesn't believe they're the smartest person in the room. They want to hear the ideas. They listen deeply to the ideas. They facilitate spirited debates. But then they all drive to a decision. And then when they get there, they're all on board. It's not like, oh my God, my idea lost. I'm going to spend the next 2 years undermining this project, like you might see in a Dilbert cartoon, right? So they understand the bigger picture. And a lot of leaders can't handle being challenged by their people. They just, they're way too egotistical to allow that to happen. So to me, that's where the real magic happens.
All right, we got time for one more. Ali, you're up.
Yes, we talk about most of the organizations, but I want to ask the people, what do you think about the healthcare? I've been in a technology since 1978, and I've seen that companies like Cisco's or Ascend bought by AT&T, which after AT&T bought them, went down. Their products didn't go through the market as much. But what do you think about the healthcare? Because I've been working with the healthcare organizations, but there is no digitals coming in because some of these physicians, they are on top, they got chip on their shoulders and they don't want to move forward, but they want to look at it, oh, we are the best. We are the making decision. What is the market of the healthcare? When is going to get digitized? What is going to take them to be digitized?
I mean, it is, clearly, right, the level of frustration led Warren Buffett, Jeff Bezos, and Jamie Dimon to create a company called Maven, which I'm sure you've heard of, right? Atul Gawande was the CEO. They wanted to be massively disruptive. They never figured out what their mission was, and they just imploded. I've worked with healthcare clients that are to this day taking 5,000 faxes in a day and employing sub-minimum wage people to read those faxes manually. Okay. It is, I don't know. There's no simple answer, my friend, right? It is a heavily regulated industry. It seems to me a different world today. I don't know if you have a specific question, right? But man, what a challenging environment it is, right? I've run a bunch of hackathons for healthcare companies, and it goes back to Zoya's point, right? They do something in the skunk works, and I lead a hackathon. It leads to an idea. They create a skunk works, and then they try to bring it back into the organization. It's dead before the first PowerPoint slide goes up. Okay, it's dead on arrival. It's a difficult world to navigate, and I'm glad that I'm not in it. That's my point.
Well, Mike, We are now officially out of time. Mike, thanks so much for co-hosting this with me, and to everybody else, thank you very much for attending. I do ask that all of you help us innovate by filling out the survey. You can find it in the community. We put it in the chat. We're looking for your opinion, and that's it for now. Take care.
Allan, thank you. What an awesome discussion. Thank you all for your robust participation today. Really enjoyed having you. Thank you.